If you work in data science or really any kind of scientific computing, you've used a tool called NumPy. You probably use it every single day. It's the absolute bedrock of the entire Python data ecosystem. But this isn't going to be a story about code. It's a human story about one researcher, a huge problem, and a community that was about to split right down the middle. And it all kicks off in a place you'd probably never guess.
And this quote right here from the creator himself, Travis Oliphant, is our perfect starting point. He's telling us flat out, if you want to understand NumPy, you have to rewind. We have to go back to a time before it existed and talk about its bigger, older sibling, SciPy.
All right, so let's do it. Let's go back. Picture this. It's 1999. A young Travis Oliphant is a researcher at the Mayo Clinic, and he's not on some grand mission to change the world of programming. Nope, he's just trying to get his work done.
That's it. That's the whole origin story right there. There was no master plan for some universal computing library. Oliphant was working with medical imaging software, and he just needed a simple way to pull that data into Python. It was a personal, practical problem that needed solving.
And it all just kind of grew from there. He found an open source tool, tweaked it a bit to create his first module, NumPy, and then, in his own words, he just threw it up on a really ugly-looking web page. And as he needed more tools for his research, he just built them, usually by wrapping these old, battle-tested Fortran libraries. He was basically building a whole ecosystem, just for himself, one little problem at a time.
But here's the thing. When you build something useful, even if it's just for yourself, other people eventually find it. And these scattered but super useful tools started to attract others who are trying to solve the exact same kinds of problems. This is the moment a personal project starts turning into a real community.
And things started moving fast. I mean, look at this timeline. In '99, it's just one module, NumPy. A year later, his tools get bundled into Multipack. But 2001, that's the real game changer. That's when Eric Jones helps get everything organized into SciPy, giving the community an actual home. But you see that last entry? By 2004, there was trouble on the horizon.
Before we get to the big conflict, though, we have to talk about this one crucial moment. See, the tools were powerful, but they were a pain to install. And then a high school student named Robert Kern, and Oliphant didn't even know he was in high school at the time, did something that changed everything. He built Windows installers.
And the impact was just staggering. As soon as installing the software became a simple one-click process, user base just exploded. We're talking an estimated 100 times more users. It was this massive lesson. Making something accessible is every bit as important as making it powerful.
So now you've got this booming user base, a powerful set of tools, and SciPy.org and its conference series become the official town square. It was a place for this scattered group of scientists and coders to finally connect, share ideas, and really build an identity. Things were looking incredible.
But as so often happens in these fast-growing open-source worlds, a major disagreement started to bubble up. The community was heading straight for a crisis, one that threatened to tear the whole thing apart.
And the fight was over the most fundamental piece of the puzzle, the array. You had two camps. On one side, there was Numeric, the original library that SciPy was built on. On the other side, you had NumArray, a newer, fancier library with more features, and it was being used by big players like the Space Telescope Science Institute. Two different ways of doing the same basic thing.
Now, this wasn't just some nerdy academic debate. It had serious, real-world consequences. Tools built for one couldn't talk to tools built for the other. Users were forced to keep multiple memory-hogging copies of their data. The community's energy was split, progress was grinding to a halt, the whole ecosystem was in real danger.
And this is where Travis Oliphant steps back into the spotlight. He saw this split happening, and he felt like he was one of the only people who could actually bridge the gap. But to do it, well, it was going to be a massive gamble, both personally and professionally.
And here's just how big that gamble was. Oliphant was a professor, and he was up for tenure. During his review, his department chair basically told him, hey, you're spending a lot of time on this open source stuff. Maybe you should spend less time on that. The very work that could save this community was being seen as a career killer.
But then, just a few months after that stark warning, a little bit of fate stepped in. A class he was slated to teach got canceled, and suddenly his schedule opened up. And even with that threat to his academic career hanging over his head, he knew he had to do it. He knew both libraries inside and out, and he decided to go for it. He was going to build something new that could unite them both.
And it was a truly monumental task. For the first 6 to 8 months, he was pretty much on his own, just grinding, pushing his own skills to the absolute limit.
But once people saw he was serious, key community members like Robert Kern jumped in to help. And the hardest part wasn't even writing the new code. It was making sure all the old code from both worlds would still work without breaking. The whole process took a year and a half.
So after 18 long months of this intense, risky work, often done in direct defiance of his day job's expectations, it was time. It was time to show the community what he'd built. This was the moment of truth. So there he was, at the SciPy conference at Caltech, standing in front of the very people he'd been doing all this for, the scientists, the researchers from both sides of the divide, and he demoed NumPy, the library that was designed to be their new common ground.
And what was their reaction? A standing ovation. The whole room, 100 of his peers, got to their feet. For Oliphant, it was this incredibly validating moment. He said it perfectly. I knew this was important, but I could see that it was important. The community finally had its answer.
But remember that warning from his department chair? Yeah, it wasn't an idle threat. NumPy was his massive, historic triumph. But the time he poured into it came at a steep academic price. Just like his chair had warned, when his 10-year review finally came up, he was denied.
And that brings us to the final, and I think maybe the most important part of this whole story. Because the success of NumPy isn't just about one person's vision or their sacrifice. It's about what happened next.
And this is the real victory. Today, Travis Oliphant doesn't maintain NumPy. The project grew way beyond him. It's now run by a global community of contributors, the very community he fought so hard to unite in the first place. The ultimate sign of its success is that it doesn't need its creator anymore.
So the story of NumPy, from one person's tiny problem to a divided community to a unified foundation for modern science, it really leaves us with a big question. What problem in your world is just sitting there, waiting for a passionate community to come together and solve it?